Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our headlines. Global markets have jolted after dozens of nations were hit with steep tariff rises as stocks take a slide across continents. Meanwhile, protests take place in Brazil as tariff rates of up to 50% spark public anger. Donald Trump has again confirmed that sanctions will be placed on Russia if there is no peace deal with Ukraine by his deadline. Meanwhile, Russia says that 3 people have died in Ukrainian strikes on the country. Well, this comes as US President Donald Trump says he's positioned 2 nuclear submarines in response to war threats from Russia's former president. Trump and Dmitry Medvedev have traded taunts in recent days. Protests have taken place in countries including the US, UK and South Africa as fighting continues in the Gaza enclave. It comes as the United States promises a new Gaza food plan, while the Hamas-run Gaza Civil Defense says Israeli fire has killed at least 22 further Palestinians. President Trump has fired a top Labour official accusing her of falsifying weak jobs data without evidence. The move, along with the Fed resignation and tariff turmoil, sent markets plunging as Trump again called for Fed Chair Jerome Powell to resign. A gunman has opened fire at the Owl Bar in Anaconda, Montana, killing 4 people on Friday morning. Police identified the suspect as a local military veteran, triggering a widespread manhunt. Colombia's former president Alvaro Uribe has been sentenced to 12 years of house arrest. A judge found him guilty of bribing a witness and abusing legal procedures in a case dating back over a decade. And NASA's SpaceX Crew 11 has successfully docked at the International Space Station after an express 15-hour flight. 4 members of the Crew 10 mission could return from the ISS as early as Wednesday. Starting this hour as anti-Trump protests swept Brazil with demonstrators in Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo and Brasilia denouncing US tariffs on Brazilian goods. Outside the US consulate in Rio, protesters burned an effigy of President Donald Trump and an American flag, while in Sao Paulo a poster depicting Trump as a devil was set ablaze. Brazil's government vowed to defend its economic sovereignty, with protest leader Bianca Borges calling the tariffs blackmail using trade instruments. Officials say the measures will be challenged through both legal and diplomatic channels. Let's now listen to what some of the protesters have had to say.
Do Brasil. Nós entendemos que a imposição de tarifas sobre produtos brasileiros por Donald Trump não é mais do que uma tentativa de chantagem utilizando instrumentos comerciais. Mas a verdade
A importância de fazer esse tipo de movimento, principalmente na frente do consulado norte-americano, é mostrar que o Brasil é soberano, o Brasil tem lei e o Brasil não vai se dobrar para fascista, seja dos Estados Unidos, seja de onde for. Nós
aceitar. Reafirmamos a nossa soberania com várias medidas que nós consideramos fundamentais. E uma delas é romper com a dependência que o nosso país tem dos principais países do mundo, em especial aos Estados Unidos.
Meanwhile, in Washington, turmoil at the US Commerce Department's Export Bureau has left thousands of license applications in limbo, the worst backlog in over 30 years. Sources say staff departures, stalled rulemaking and poor communication have crippled the agency. The delays are affecting industries worldwide, including billions of dollars in NVIDIA AI chip orders to China, despite assurances from Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick that sales of NVIDIA's H20 chips would be approved. No licenses have yet been issued, threatening trade flows and escalating tensions in global tech markets. Well, joining us to discuss the significance of both of these updates, Roger Liu, an assistant professor at the National Sun Yat-sen University, who's joining us live from Taipei. Roger, thank you so much for your time. Let's first briefly look at these protests in Brazil. Of course, tariffs of up to 50%. With some exemptions in place, but still a huge markup on what was potentially expected after that first Liberation Day. Do you think protests like these in Brazil are going to be potentially carried out elsewhere, given the impact on consumers that these tariffs may have?
Well, yes, thank you for having me. What happens in Brazil actually can be spread to other countries as well, especially after Donald Trump has unveiled a series of tariff plans on different countries. Well, including Taiwan, India, and other places. Actually, people are very surprised of what they expected, especially in Taiwan. Here, I can share with you is that, well, the Taiwanese government and the people thought that they have sacrificed so much by giving TSMC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, to invest in the United States by 165 billion US dollars. And the government of Taiwan also promised to invest $40 billion in purchasing the US LNG's liquid natural gas from Alaska. But after that, we still got 20% of the tariff rate. So I think this is to everybody's surprise by sacrificing too much to that. And I think, well, what happened to India actually has been felt in Taiwan as well, especially when India and Taiwan has been trying to increase their security collaboration along with the U.S. at the same time under the framework of Quad. But Donald Trump's tariff scheme actually ruined a lot of things like this, and it has a great security implications to allies about like that. And what happens in South Korea as well and in Japan as well actually has been a shockwave sent across different countries in the continent and the world.
Absolutely. And Roger, just briefly before we move on to our next point, of course, talk about turmoil at the US Commerce Department's Export Bureau. This potentially impacting goods like AI chips, like NVIDIA's chips, which we did speak about. Do you expect this to be a problem that's resolved, or is this just a signal potentially that too much is happening too quickly and the infrastructure isn't ready for it?
Well, I think that will be, it makes much sense from the U.S. perspective that they are trying to reindustrialize themselves and to suppress China in the technological front. However, well, they have to consider others aspects as well. For example, including the big tech companies from the U.S. and from Taiwan. Actually, they rely very much on their profits on semiconductors. But the Section 223 that the U.S. is going to impose on different countries actually will bring in, for example, in Taiwan, 30 to 35% of the tariffs on the semiconductor-related products, and that will actually deliver a blow to the companies over there. So people are actually paying much attention to that.
Yes, Roger, please do stay with us. We're going to stick with trade, but slightly shift our attention as US President Donald Trump's sweeping new tariffs on exports from 69 trading partners have sent global markets tumbling and spurred countries to push for new deals. Switzerland shocked by 39% duty, and India hit with 25%, sought fresh talks. Canada faces 35%, and Brazil, as we've mentioned, 50%, which it called temporary. The order sets import duties of 10% to 41% starting on August the 7th, lifting the US effective tariff rate from 18% to 2.3% last year. While in response, the Dow fell 1.23%, the S&P 500 1.6%, and the Nasdaq 2.24%. It was a similar story across the continents as Europe's stocks 600 slid 1.89%. Markets also digested weak jobs data, showing just 73,000 US jobs added in July, with June's sharply revised lower. Trump claimed the numbers were rigged and ordered the firing of Bureau of Labour Statistics Commissioner Erica McEnteffer. Canadian negotiators warned a deal with Washington could be weeks away. The EU, despite a framework deal, still awaits tariff carve-outs for cars and aircraft. Analysts say the new levies are already pushing up prices, with home furnishings and durable goods seeing their fastest price rise since March 2022. Well, Roger, thank you so much for staying with us. There's a lot in there, but mainly I'd like to focus on the markets. We've seen Trump announcements relating to tariffs after that initial April 2nd Liberation Day. We've seen the markets sort of swallow up Trump's rhetoric and change and talk about potential deals with other countries. But it seems now this deadline has passed, new tariffs to be imposed. The markets have reacted. Do you expect this to be a trend that continues?
Well, I will say that actually Donald Trump tried to lengthen the shadow of future by giving the different countries of hope that the tariffs rates can be further reduced if they first allowed further investments to be done in the U.S. or they are going to, if the countries are willing to give more favorable conditions to the U.S. However, this actually has caused a lot of domestic pressures from different governments and countries in the world. Well, the first victim I can give you is Japan. Japan actually, the Ishiba, the prime minister, has lost their election in the upper house. That's the first. And secondly, the South Korea actually has been facing domestic pressures as well. And the latest one is in Taiwan, that the Taiwanese president actually has lost his recall campaign against the opposition party, which is considered to be more pro-China. And now the people inside of Taiwan has been demanding the government to be taking a tougher stance towards and some effective measures to counter the possible implications of Donald Trump's tariff scheme. So I think for the future, of course, well, the future can be bright and dark at the same time. It depends on how the different foreign governments are willing to take up or to swallow this kind of domestic political pressures posed upon them because as a result of the Donald Trump's tariff scheme.
Roger Liu, thank you ever so much for your time and your insights on those topics relating to trade. We move on now, though, and head to Europe as a Chinese envoy has called for forging broader consensus for the political settlement of the Ukraine crisis. Speaking at a UN Security Council meeting, Guang Shuang, China's deputy permanent representative to the UN, said that Ukraine crisis is currently at a critical stage and urged all parties to make greater efforts and work towards the same direction. Gang noted the conflicting parties should prioritise humanitarianism and civilian protection, abide by international humanitarian law and avoid attacks on civilians and civil infrastructure. This comes after Russian President Vladimir Putin stated that Moscow hoped for more peace talks with Ukraine, but believes the war is currently going in Russia's favour. This comes amid warnings from US President Donald Trump, who said that the US will impose new sanctions on Russia and on countries that buy Russian energy, mainly China and India, if Russia does not end the war by August the 8th. Let's now take a closer look at what the Chinese deputy representative has said.
在过去的7天时间里，安理会已经3次讨论乌克兰问题。我们花费时间精力在安理会反复开会的同时，应该花费更多的时间和更多的精力去进行调节，推动和谈。中方将继续以习近平主席提出的4个应该为遵循，为和平奔走，为促谈努力，同国际社会一道，为实现乌克兰危机的政治解决，发挥积极和建设性的作用。
Well, joining us to discuss these comments and the wider ramifications of potential peace in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Keith Vaz, a former UK minister, joining us live from London. Keith, as always, a pleasure to have you on the programme. Let's first look at these comments by China. Clearly, they're looking towards potential peace. Do you think that this is potentially an ulterior motive because of those tariffs that could impact China from purchasing Russian energy, or is this really a Chinese stance on getting this war ended for geopolitical stability?
Good morning, Joshua from London. Who knows? The intervention of China is significant because they have not really been involved in any meaningful way before. And as we all know, the issue of tariffs is something that dominates the minds of the American administration, in particular President Trump. I don't think I remember a time when an American president is using economic power for political means. This is a real change in the way in which geopolitics operates. If you help us on a particular issue, we will make sure that we will not put up your tariffs. It's tariffs for peace in a sense. The only problem is we're not getting the peace. And although some countries like Britain have worked very closely with the Americans and have their tariffs reduced to 10%, other countries, such as an organization such as the EU, are being punished by President Trump. So the Chinese work in very mysterious ways, but it is unusual for them to start making statements of this kind, and therefore their intervention must be for a purpose. I don't think they're particularly wanting to suck up to the president. They don't seem to me to be like the kind of country that does that. But it is important that we recognize that there is an important intervention here, and it should be acted upon.
Keith, I'm interested by the comments that were made at the UN Security Council meeting, talking about attacks on civilian infrastructure, talking about the humanitarianism of this conflict and war, which of course has seen civilian casualties reported on both sides. This in the wake of reports that have said that Russia could potentially be supporting, China could be supporting Russia through the sale of technology and potential elements that can make up military assets. That is, of course, only a report, but could this potentially be one thing to one side and one thing to the other? Do you think China are trying to keep Russia and the US both on side, given the instability at the moment?
I think they probably are. I think what China is not an interventionist nation, and nothing seems to worry China particularly more than Taiwan. If you introduce the T word in any discussion, or if anything is to do with Taiwan, China goes berserk and starts issuing threats, etc. Otherwise, it uses soft power in a way that no other nation on this planet uses it. So when it does intervene, it could be doing so, of course, for its own purposes, i.e. on the economic and tariffs front, but also they could be doing it because they genuinely feel that ramping up the world disorder is not in their interests. After all, they hold a lot of American debt. The world is all interlinked to each other, and therefore we need to remember that they have a lot in this. They've got a lot of skin in the game, and they need to make sure that the economic prosperity of the world continues, because they lose the most. They've got the most money invested in the United States. Something that President Trump would be wise to remember. The Chinese suddenly call in their debt. It would cause massive problems to the Americans. So I think everyone knows what's going on. The trouble is, Joshua, those of us in public service or in the news service, such as NewsX, we have to react to everything that Donald Trump says. And when he says something like, I'm moving my submarines, everyone goes mad and wants to know why that's the case. The Chinese are very, very careful. They don't overreact, and I think their intervention, therefore, is much more serious for the purpose of doing that.
Yes, absolutely, Keith. We are short on time, but just a brief question for you. August the 8th is that deadline that Trump has set for sanctions on Russia and third-party countries. Do you think that will actually come into place?
No. It will definitely be extended one way or the other, because as we speak, Zelensky is on the phone to Britain, France and Germany to ask for a peace summit. As soon as the Europeans do something, then President Trump feels he has to do something as well. The deadline will not happen. That's my prediction. Of course, if I'm wrong, you can have me on the 12th of August and tell me that I was wrong, but this deadline is very elastic.
Well, Keith, right or wrong, it will be a pleasure to speak to you at that point, and thank you ever so much for your unique insights. We move away from Europe and now head to the Middle East as activists with Jewish Voice for Peace staged a protest at the New York offices of Senators Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, condemning their votes against halting arms shipments to Israel. The protesters, wearing black T-shirts emblazoned with Jews say let Gaza live, demanded an end to the violence in Gaza, where over 60,000 Palestinians have reportedly died, according to local Hamas-run officials. Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian protests took place across Britain, with people banging pots and pans to voice their opposition to Israel's military campaign. The demonstrations coincided with Britain's threat to recognise Palestinian statehood. Here is what some protesters have said.
It's just beyond me. Why hasn't it been recognised as a state this entire time? It's just Islamophobia at its purest, and it shows that your privilege is determined by the colour of your skin. If you're white, it's okay to exist. If you're brown and you are an indigenous person and you're Muslim, somehow your rights get to be debated in some way by the Western countries, and it's just deeply, deeply upsetting. It's so atrocious, and yeah, I'm livid. I'm sorry.
Now, this is the man who said in October 2023 that Israel has the right to deprive 2.2 million people water, of food, of shelter, of medicine. They have the right. No, they do not have the right. This is from a human rights lawyer. He never tires of telling us that. The man is complicit, and I think he should be in The Hague as much as Netanyahu and the rest of the butchers, you know, Ben-Gvir and Smoldrich and the rest of what I think the world is seeing are fascists, are open fascists, is sat in the Israeli cabinet.
While in Pretoria, South Africa, protesters rallied against the silence of Arab countries and Western governments, accusing them of complicity in the Gaza war. South Africa has been a vocal critic of Israel's actions, calling for an immediate ceasefire and full humanitarian access to the region. Let's listen to another protester in South Africa.
For me, I don't understand why the United States, Britain, France, Germany would actually support that type of system and see genocide and try even to deny it. I mean, how do you deny genocide that you see it's live? And in Westmore, you go and provide food and kill them when they come to get food. I've never seen a thing like this in my life. It's like trapping rats. When you want to kill them, you put food there so that they can come and you shoot at them. What type of world are we?
Well, joining us on the programme, Dr. Alvit Ningtajam, who's a Deputy Director and Assistant Professor at the Symbiosis School of International Studies, joining us live from Pune. Thank you so much for your time. Protests going on across the globe. We've seen many protests, but of course there has been a move from some world leaders towards putting pressure on the situation currently at play in Gaza. Do you think that there has been now a shift, not just with members of the public, but also potentially with those world leaders in condemning what's going on the ground in the Gaza enclave?
Right. Thank you, Joshua, for having me on your show once again this afternoon. What we are seeing right now in terms of this protest and different parts of the world also reflect the increasing roles being played in international relations by the non-state actors. What I mean to say, the non-state actors are these groups or the pressure groups or the interest groups that exist in different parts of the world. And the protests that you have mentioned in US, in South Africa, and also in the United Kingdom talk a volume about the growing sentiments of the public against, for the Palestinian sufferings, because we are not seeing any light at the end of the tunnel. So it is also a clear indication of the frustrations on the part of the civilian society or the civil society organizations or any other pressure groups because of the inability of the world government or the international community or the international institutions to improve the situations on the ground, that is in Gaza Strip. So there are increasingly number of calls coming from various parts of the world, including some of the very important allies of Israel, to improve the humanitarian crisis inside Gaza Strip. So in a very democratic society, particularly in the West, the role of the non-state actors, particularly these NGOs or the pressure groups or the interest groups, are very important. They are also the proponents of peace, and that we have seen in the US during the 80s, particularly when a large number of the universities in the US had called for an end to the apartheid regime in South Africa. So similarly, there's also an increasing realization and the cognizance amongst the civilians that, it's high time we put some pressure both on the international institutions or regional institutions as well as on Israel to course correct what they are doing inside Gaza Strip, particularly looking at the very dire consequences being faced by the civilians who are facing the humanitarian crisis. So it's more of a symbolism, and at the same time it is also pressure tactics being used by these non-state actors against Israel.
Yes, Dr. Ningtajam, if you do stay with us, we're going to move away specifically from the Gaza Strip, but now look at the wider Middle East, as the Israeli military has announced that it has intercepted a missile launched from Yemen, which triggered sirens across multiple areas, including Jerusalem. The missile was reported fired by Yemen's Houthi rebels, who have been targeting Israel in what they call solidarity with Palestinians amidst the ongoing Gaza conflict. The Houthis claim to have attacked Israel. Let's listen in.
نفذت القوة الصاروخية في القوات المسلحة اليمنية عملية عسكرية نوعية استهدفت مطار اللد في منطقة يافا المحتلة، وذلك بصاروخ باليستي فرط صوتي نوع فلسطين 2، وقد حققت العملية هدفها بنجاح بفضل الله، وتسببت في هروب أكثر من 4 ملايين من قطعان الصهاينة الغاصبين إلى الملاجئ وتوقف حركة المطار.
Well, Dr. Ningtajam, thank you for staying with us. We don't have much longer left, but how do you think that these strikes will be looked at by Israel? Do you think that there could be a response, or do you think that Israel are looking at this as a situation that's manageable given so few of these dozens of strikes which have happened since the end of the ceasefire in March have actually hit any targets?
I think, Joshua, I think it is pretty much I would be within the control of Israel, to tackle this kind of missiles coming in, I would say, intermittently. Israel has had some of the fiercest battles in the recent times, trying to fight off the missiles and the other attacks coming from Lebanon, and at the same time from various other non-state actors in the region, apart from fighting what's happening inside Gaza Strip. So Houthis are, I think, one of those important players and non-state actors, again, armed groups that try to put up a fight against the Israeli might in the region, and they have been doing this for the last several months, particularly not even several months, like for the last couple of years. But how much of their, missile attacks against Israel would lead to another flare-up? I don't see that happening anytime soon, because this is something which the Israelis will be very manageable, will be very able to handle, as and when it comes from the Yemeni shores. But it is also an indication that Houthis would really want to try to become one of those actors from the region that should be recognized as a challenger to Israel's military might, and at the same time trying to give that kind of a support to the Palestinians. In the recent years, we have seen, or particularly in the last month's episode, or in June.
Dr. Ningtajam, I'm so sorry to interject, but unfortunately we are out of time. Thank you ever so much for your insights on both of those topics. Very briefly, before we end the programme, let's look up to space, as 4 astronauts have docked with the International Space Station today aboard a SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule. The crew includes NASA's Zena Cardman and Mike Fink, Japan's Kimuya Yui and Russia's Oleg Platonov. They lifted off yesterday from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This is NASA's 11th crew rotation mission under its Commercial Crew program. The astronauts are beginning a 6-month stay on the ISS, carrying out science experiments, including moon landing simulations for the Artemis program. According to reports, their cargo includes Armenian pomegranate seeds to study plant growth in space. Well, that is all we have time for, and we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.